and these three secret societies all kind of vying for power behind the scenes in NASA, but all having essentially the same core root belief system about their, the fact that they came from the stars, that human beings came from the stars, and so forth.
Yes. And what I guess we can say as well is that essentially, as you described it, through the Paperclip project and whatnot, these secret societies have basically worked together in order to kind of achieve this goal of being able to put men on the moon. And to me, it almost seems like there's some kind of alchemical ritual almost to me of bringing the rocks of the moon to the Earth, or moon dust.
Yes.
I don't know about that. What's your take on that, Mike?
Well, yeah, I agree with you. Now, I think like Apollo 11. I believe that they landed literally in the middle of nowhere. I mean, we argue that there are ruins, structures on the moon, but I don't think Apollo 11 landed necessarily anywhere near them. I think it was a ceremonial mission. I think it was pretty much symbolic. I think that it definitely involved alchemical rituals. I think the purpose of Apollo 11 was to land at that particular place and time and perform a specific Masonic ceremony and come back. And in essence, what they were doing was they were consecrating the moon. They were definitely, going there to sort of reclaim it for this version of the human race, which has roots, I believe, on these other planets in the solar system a long, long time ago. And, I think there's always been a controversy of what exactly did Neil Armstrong say,
yeah,
and what exactly did he mean when he stepped off that first step on the moon. And he said, it's one small step for man and one giant leap for mankind. And people keep saying, he must have meant a man, one small step for a man, because that's the only thing that makes any sense. And they've claimed they've gone through and listened to the radio, and they think he really did try to say that, but it's not true. It's simply not true. He meant exactly what he said. And what he meant was that it's a small step for us, man, this current version of the much broader human family, but it's a giant leap for all mankind, which is the larger, similar family that I think has probably existed in this solar system for eons, for millions upon millions of years in all probability, and probably lived on Mars, and lived and built these bases on the moon, and lived on Venus. And, after the cataclysm that sort of threw us back to the Stone Age, I think what he meant was, okay, now we're back. We're reclaiming that which is ours, which is not just the Earth, but the rest of this Eden, this Garden of Eden, this beautiful solar system that whoever it was made for us. And I think that's exactly what he meant. And that, there's a lot of alchemical ritual and so forth in all that.
Well, that's really, really interesting. I wonder a little bit if they've been trying to go back again, so to speak, that they view this as a kind of a recovery mission in some way. And if we talk about that, I think that we can look at some of the project names, for instance, and some of the logos that NASA uses, and it seems to be that they, even on an official level, want to communicate this in some way. Would you agree with me on that point?
Yeah, absolutely, and we do talk about that in Dark Vision and show some of the program patches, and they're all, there's things, for instance, the constellation of Orion appears on the official Apollo program patch, and that makes no sense if you buy into Greek mythology, which is the public mythology of NASA, because Orion had nothing to do with Apollo. They were not the same. They were two different people, and why would the constellation of Orion be on this patch? And as you go back into the subtleties of that, you find that Orion was synonymous with the ancient Egyptian god Osiris, which of course we now know that the Freemasons and the Nazis and the magicians all worshipped as their god. So all through the naming of spacecraft, the lunar module for Apollo 16 was named Orion. You may as well have just named it Osiris. And all these sort of symbols keep coming up over and over again all throughout NASA's history. And there's sort of an Egyptian motif, as we call it, that runs through NASA, especially in the early days.
Absolutely. And again, you mentioned before ritual alignment model. Is that something that dovetails with this as well, Mike?
Yeah. What we found, and Richard started this work initially back in the mid-'90s, and then I really sort of kind of took it and went a little bit further with it. And what we found was that we believe that NASA specifically selects landing dates and places and times with the idea that the stars will be in certain positions, certain power positions over the landing site. For instance, the constellation of Orion, let's say, Orion's belt stars, the 3 belt stars, we found that they very consistently are on the horizon or at 19.5 degrees or at 33 degrees above or below the landing sites when certain things take place, when landings take place, when different events happen. And we actually sort of laid out in Dark Mission, I think it's in Chapter 5, where, again, this Masonic ritual we talked about that Buzz Aldrin, we believe, performed exactly 33 minutes after they landed on the moon, which, of course, is a significant Masonic number. It's tied in with their numerology, was done, and that the reason why they landed where they did and at the time they did and on the date they did was so that he could perform this communion ceremony, which is actually an ancient Egyptian ceremony, an offering to Osiris with Sirius, star Sirius, at 19.5 degrees above the landing site. And if you get into the book, you'll understand what these different numbers mean and why they're significant to these secret societies. And yeah, I think, we've really talked about it and pretty much stated that we think the entire Apollo 11 mission was designed around that specific Masonic ritual that Aldrin performed that day.
So, I mean, what is it now? It's almost 40 years since we at least officially went back to the moon. What has happened here, Mike?
In terms of why we haven't gone back? Or?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Well, you kind of touched on it earlier. I think that, Apollo 11 early on was kind of symbolic, and then after that they begin what we believe were salvage missions. I think that a bigger part of the Apollo program was to go to the moon and bring back not just rocks and dust, but actual artifacts, actual samples of this technology that built these incredible ruins that we see on the lunar surface. So especially, I would say, Apollo 17. We talk about Apollo 17 quite extensively in Dark Mission near the end of it. And I think that these were all designed to go and bring certain things back from the moon, bring back evidence, bring back proof of the gods, and bring back technology, hopefully, to be exploited and to be used in the space program or in private technology or for private technological development throughout the years. And I think the reason we haven't gone back is because we kind of got what we wanted. We found out what we needed to find out, and we didn't really want to, we didn't want to go back, and we didn't want people to be focusing on the moon. And the problem now, I think that NASA faces, is that other countries have developed in the intervening 40 years the capability to go there and possibly go there with manned missions and sort of, catch up with us. So now we find ourselves in a bit of a race to get back there again and to, be sure that we can sort of micromanage or at least to some extent manage what they will find and what these other countries can get their hands on.
Yeah. So much I want to ask you about this, but do you think there could have been? I think you and Richard have talked about this, that there's some even private companies that have been involved in the space programs, like Bell Labs and AT&T. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. And of course, they essentially hired different companies to do different things, develop different technologies and so forth for the space program. And Bell Labs was one, or actually Bellcom was one, and they did a number of things in terms of managing and selecting the landing sites, which we've argued were they were picked for very specific reasons. They had certain things they were looking for at each one of these landing sites that were not simply geology and science. They involved salvaging of technology and so forth. And so that's been our argument. And these companies also did things like they developed a very, very special film that was taken to the moon and that was used for the photographs on the moon. And Richard is one of the few people who back in those days actually got his hands on some of this film and was able to take pictures with it. And as he put it at the time, he said, you literally couldn't take a bad picture with this film. It was so fantastic. But curiously, when the space program ended, when Apollo ended, the remaining film was destroyed. The lab where it was put together and designed and manufactured was destroyed.